Hi, this is Lorena, and I wanted to do a tutorial on how to make a quilt top using your sashing or using sashing. Here I'm showing you what the differences are when you add sashing. One thing is if you don't have a lot of blocks, sashing really makes your quilt grow. And here is just a visual, and in a minute I'm going to show you that you can use more than one sashing. On this quilt I have 3 layers of sashing, the red, the black, and the red, and I added a square to split up every block. Now on this quilt I only used one piece of sashing, and I used the purple square right there that's in the middle to split up the blocks. Now there's just different variations of putting your quilt top together, and I'm just going to show you this where we use simply just one strip of sashing, and we're just going to connect it all together. Now here I'm measuring my sashing 3.5 inches. Take in consideration that every time you sew a seam you're going to lose a fourth, and sashing is going to be in between 2 blocks, so you're going to lose a 1/2 inch. I wanted the sashing to be 3 inches visually, and I knew I was going to lose a 1/2 an inch, so I added a 1/2 inch. Honestly, you can make your sashing any size you want. Just take in consideration that you are going to lose a fourth every time you seam, and you're going to have 2 seams when you're connecting sashing, so more likely you lose a 1/2 inch. So here you see me having my strips together. Now my block was 9 by 9, and so I need to make sure that my sashing is the length or width of my block. Even though one area is just going to be 3.5 inches, and here I'm cutting the sashing 9 inches wide, the width of my block. And so here I'm just getting a couple strips together. I think I connected 6 blocks together, and so I'm going to need 2 sashings per row. And so I ended up needing 4 strips of sashing to connect the blocks. And here I'm just grabbing, cutting up my sashing. And in a minute, I'm going to start getting those quilt blocks together, and I'm going to start laying them out. One of the reasons I do this is I want to make sure that I did cut my sashing right. And here you see me have a block and then put my sashing in between. So if I was confusing you earlier with numbers, now you see it. And here's another block. And do you see how the sashing is in between, and each seam is going to take a fourth, so that sashing is going to shrink by 1 inch. Then I have my second row, and I'm just deciding where I want my quilt blocks. And I'm putting the sashing, in a minute I'm going to start putting the sashing in between each one. Now, when you're doing a quilt block like this or quilt top like this, take in consideration that you're going to have to put sashing on the top, the middle, and the bottom, and on the sides. And so here you see me get a very long strip that I just cut 3.5 inches wide, and I probably use it's 45 inches, the strip, and I cut it in half. And here you see me putting one in the middle, and in a minute I'm going to also add one on the bottom. And I'm just making sure that everything is laying nice and clean. I usually have my long sashings not trimmed off yet until I've connected the row, and then I measure my sashing. So here you see the top, and you're also going to need 2 more strips for each side. And so here you see me just grabbing a piece of one of the blocks and a piece of sashing, and I'm going to go to the sewing machine, and I'm going to go ahead and just sew a seam all the way down. And in those areas where I split it up, I'm going to grab another piece of sashing and another block and sew the seam to make myself a row. But here I decided that I wanted to change the block. I didn't like that block so much, and so here you see me grabbing another piece of sashing, and you see me just sewing all the way down to the end of that block and sashing. So here you see me line up a row, and I'm connecting the yellow with another piece of sashing. What I ended up doing when I was filming is I changed my mind a lot. But initially all you want to do is connect your sashing with your block and then connect another block, and you're going to make a row. And so here you see me ironing one of the rows that I completely got done. And however many rows you or blocks you have, If you have 9 or 12, you could do your rows 4 by 4. You could do them 5, whatever it is. It's just the same process. The block and your sashing, and then your block and your sashing, and you just connect them together. So now we're going to get that long sashing, and we're going to measure the row of quilt blocks that you have and cut your sashing the exact size. A lot of quilters, they split their sashing in half, find the center of where the quilts are, and pin out. I have a tendency to just pin from the beginning all the way down. I don't have issues with it wavering or the fabric being loose as long as I've pinned. And so here I've sewn that row, and I'm going to go ahead and iron. There's a lot of benefits in ironing. You make sure that everything is nice and sewn. Like right there, you see it wasn't sewn. And I wouldn't have seen that if I wouldn't have ironed and made sure everything was nice and pressed. Now, after you've done this part, you're also going to get your other set of blocks and you're going to sew them onto that row like I showed you. And you see that I also sewed the very top of that. Um, quilt. Here's the center seam that I sewed, and here's the bottom seam. Now the next thing you need to do is sew the top and bottom seam. So now what we're going to do is we're going to measure the top of your quilt, and you measure from corner to corner. And the reason I'm measuring is because I need to know how long I need to cut my sashing. And what I did is I cut it, and I cut one for the top and the bottom, and I pinned it and I sewed it on my sewing machine. And here I'm just showing you that I did pin it and I sewed it, and now I'm going to the iron and just pressing everything nice and clean and making sure I sewed my seams right. And this is what this little quilt looks like. I could add more sashings to go all the way around, but this is just adorable little baby quilt. And these are just different visuals of what sashing could do for a quilt. And this is just another picture. I thank you for watching, and I thank you for subscribing, and I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful day.